Hello everyone, it's Dr. JZ here. In this clip, I will be showing everybody how to play chess. This is important because I want everybody to have a basic understanding of chess so that you could better appreciate the chess clips I made for everybody. Right, in this first part, I will be showing everybody the chessboard, the algebraic notation system, and how all these different chess pieces work, how they move. Before I introduce every chess piece, I will be showing you the chessboard. So in front of you is a chessboard without any chess pieces. And on the bottom row, we can see the letters A to the letter H, right? The letter A to the letter H. And what are this, right? Each letter represents the name of a file, right? A file is a column on the chessboard. So altogether, we have 8 files from A to H. You also see on the left, right? On the first file, we have the numbers going from 1 all the way to 8 at the very top, right? What are these? These are what we call the ranks, right? So each row on the chessboard is called a rank. So altogether, we have 8 ranks, right? Remember that this is from white's perspective. If I rotate the board, the A file will be on my right. The first rank will be at the very top, right? At the bottom, you will see the 8th rank. In other words, this coordinate system is fixed. It follows a Cartesian system. And this also means that when I refer to a square, right? When I look at the A8 square, it is always reserved for the rook. And similarly, when you look at the A1 square, it is always reserved for the white rook. Yeah. A8 square for the black rook and A1 square for the white rook. And when you look at the positioning of the queens, right? The D8 square is black in color, and it is always reserved for the black queen. So the black queen fits into a dark square. And similarly, the white queen fits into a white square, the D1 square. Now let me rotate the board, right? And everybody can see this thing very clearly. Now I'm going to introduce everybody to how all the pieces work, right? As we know, we have 8 pawns per side, right? 8 pawns for white and 8 pawns for black, right? I will now show everybody how the pawns move, right? With the very first move, every pawn has the ability to move 2 squares forward. Every pawn can also move 1 square forward, right? A pawn can never retreat. A pawn cannot retreat. It can only advance forward, right? And so how do the pawns capture each other, right? Do they capture each other in this fashion? No, they don't, right? Pawns capture in a diagonal fashion. And this means that if I move my E pawn forward, right, by 2 squares, from E2 to E4, the black pawn on D5 can take my white pawn on E4 in a diagonal style, right? And if I advance my F3 pawn, my F pawn to the F3 square, right, the black pawn on E4 can take it, right? And similarly, right, in this case, if I move my white pawn forward to G3, there is nothing to capture for black, right? Black can simply advance his pawn forward, right? And note that in this situation, if it's white to move, right? There are no other pieces blocking the black pawn on f2, right? And it's black's turn to move, all right? It's black's turn to move. Black can simply move his pawn to f1. When this happens, when this pawn lands on f1, it can become a queen, right? It can also become a rook. It can also become a bishop. It can also become a knight, right? 4 options. In most circumstances, we choose to promote our pawn to a queen because the queen is the most dangerous piece. It is the most powerful piece. However, there are also certain circumstances in which we promote our piece to a knight, right? Later on, I will show everybody how the knight moves, right? Now let me clear all the pieces again, and I will show everybody how all the pieces work one by one, right? I shall start with the king. Now note that this is from the white perspective, right? So I will put the white king on the starting square of d1. How does a white king move, right? Or how does a king move in simple terms, right? A king can always move 1 square forward in any direction. However, it's only 1 square forward. Okay, let me show you, right? So now the king moves to the c2 square. The c2 square, he moves to the d3 square, right? d3 square, he moves forward by 1 piece, 1 position to the d4 square. And he carries on moving to the d5 square, right? The white king can also move backward, right? Unlike pawns, right? And now we're back to the starting position, right? So this is how the king moves, right? 1 square forward, 1 square backward, any direction. Let me clear the board again. Right now, let me start with how the queen moves, right? The queen is extremely powerful. It can move in any direction, right? In any number of squares, as long as there are no obstructions. In this situation, there's simply no obstructions, right? So the queen can move here. The queen can move from d1 to f3, for instance, right? Or the queen can move from d1 all the way to h5, right? The queen can also choose to move like 1 square forward, right? In this case, this is to e2, right? And the queen can also move forward, right, vertically, right? In this case, this is all the way to d8, right? And likewise, I just want to show you, right? The queen can move diagonally, right, all the way to a4, yeah. So in a nutshell, this is how the queen works. And now I will show everybody how the rook works, right? So this is the rook, right? The 2 rooks on their starting squares. So the rook is like the queen, except that the rook cannot move diagonally, right? Apart from that, it's just like the queen. So what does that mean, right? So the rook can move all the way vertically, right? And it can move horizontally. Any number of squares, right? So you guys can see this. Any number of squares, right? So that's how the rook move, right? And now later, right, I will show everybody, right, how the bishop works, right? So for the bishop, it's slightly different from the rook. It cannot move vertically, it cannot move horizontally. It can only move diagonally. Any number of squares, right? And do note that for each side, there is a light square bishop and a dark square bishop, right? So for white in this situation, right, its dark square bishop is on c1. The light square bishop is on f1, right? For black, it is a mirror image of white, right? And the light square bishop is on f8, and the dark square bishop is on f8, right? I correct myself, right? So the light square bishop for black is on c8. Yeah. So how do they move, right? Let me show you, right? So for this f1 light square white bishop, you can move diagonally like this, right, to h3. It can move diagonally to g2, right? And when this bishop is on the square on g2, it actually controls this entire diagonal, right, from h1 all the way until a8, right? I will not draw the lines for you, but everybody can see it, right? So let's say, this bishop travels all the way to h8 and goes back to h8, right? a8 to h1, yeah. So in a nutshell, this is how the bishop works, right? Okay. And now I will show everybody how the knight works, right? So I will position the 4 knights on the starting squares, right? So the knight is very unusual. The knight does not move vertically, it does not move horizontally, it does not move diagonally, but it moves in a so-called L shape, right? Sometimes I also picture the L shape as a right angle triangle, right? And what do I mean by that? Okay, let me just show you, right? So the knight, for instance, the king side knight on g1, right? Moving in an L shape, right? It can travel all the way to f3, right? So in your mind, if you visualize it, this is just like a right angle triangle, right? Yeah, it's like the hypotenuse of the right angle triangle, right? If you connect the 2 knights together, the one on f3 to the one on g1, right? It's just like the hypotenuse of a right angle triangle. Okay, so let me show everybody, right, how the knight moves, right? So from g1 to f3, and then from f3, it has a lot of options. It actually has 8 options, right? It can go from f3 to this e5, right? And it can move from f3 to g5, can move from f3 to h4, right? And then can move from f3 to h2, can move from f3 to g1, and then can move from f3 to e1, can move from f3 to d2, right? And it can move from f3 to d4, right? This is why, as much as possible, we try to put the knight on f3 for the kingside knight, and for the queenside knight, we try to position it on c3, right? Because both knights in this kind of situation, they target the center, and they have lots of options, right? As long as a square is vacant, the knight will be able to travel there, right? So this is how the knight moves, right? Okay, now I will show everybody. Yeah, now I will just reposition, right? I will just reposition all the pieces again, right? I believe that I show everybody how all the pieces work, right? All right, then take note that this is how things look like from white's perspective, right? It looks a little bit different from the black perspective, From black's perspective, the black queen is to the right of the king, right? However, from white's perspective, the white queen is to the left of the king, right? So if you see something that happened the reverse, if you see a person positioning the white queen to the right side of the king, you know that something is wrong, right? Something is off, okay? So this is something to take note. And with this, I finished the first part of our tutorial. And in the next 2 parts, I will show everybody how all the pieces work together and how chess openings work. So stay tuned, and I hope that everybody can give me a like And please subscribe to my channel. Thank you everyone.